status. And then Zaguma gets involved. And Zaguma, like Kase, as we're going to see, is a very powerful woman. And she's been offended too. She's not happy about the other wife. She's also not happy about the way that Amar Zumbani is given this treatment. So at 889, she says, well, since Amar Zumbani has given 10 horses to the griots, why don't you take the wrist of the son of your captive and offer it to the griots? It is the son of your captive. If he has given the Fulani 10 griot horses, you too have given him a captive. And so basically, she says, well, let's up the ante here a little bit. Why don't you just take Amar Zumbani by the wrist and hand him, since he's the son of a slave, and he effectively belongs to our family, we can give him to the griots as a present, which is an even higher present, the slave, than the horses, okay? So, and so he says, okay, 895, you two take him by the hand, you say it is the son of your captive. Okay, and so on line 900, Amar Zumbani said that he gave the Songhay griots, the Fulani griots, another 10 horses. So he gives them 10 more horses. And then the other man, the brother of Zaguma, grabs the hand of Amar Zumbani, who is the prince, and he said to the Fulani griots, I too have given you a captive, or I've given you a slave. Then the crowd dispersed. Oh yeah, I'm getting out of here. I don't want to be present when this is going down. This is getting dangerous, what's just happened. But Amar Zumbani is bothered. We learn on 906 very, very much. He's bothered. And he goes home and he talks to his father and he says, the father says, okay, yeah, I guess, Somala Cas on line 9 says, yeah, that's true. You are captive or you are a slave. That's the truth. Because when I married your mother, I did not buy her freedom. And he says on 914, if I at least freed your mother, but, to tell you the truth, I didn't free her. Everything I tell you is true. And so now Amar Zumbani is very angry, okay? He has this horse, we learn on 920, that he's inherited from his father. It is a black stallion with no white markings anywhere. The brother of Zaguma has the horse that has no white markings anywhere. No being could have such a black coat. So the brother has this really pure black stallion. Okay. Amar Zumbani gets a horse. It says on line 935 or 937, they couldn't find a stallion. They're telling Amar Zumbani that didn't have white marks. So they give him a black horse that has white markings, and they paint over the white markings. Okay, now this is very symbolic, right? Because the brother of Zaguma is pure-blooded. His blood is not polluted or corrupted. The brother or Amar Zumbani is kind of a bogus prince, right? Because he appears to be a prince, but it's all fake. It's all not real. It's just been painted over. And so this is a kind of very symbolic. 9 they couldn't find a black horse, but they found a horse spotted with white. 951, they say that between now and morning he will be transformed into a dark horse. But on line 992, we learn that the horse starts to sweat, and the sweat causes the indigo that they've painted on the horse to run, and it exposes the truth that it's not a pure black stallion. Okay, and just in the same way that Amar Zumbani is not a pure a member of the nobility either. All right, so now what's going to happen later is that, okay, on line 1014, Amar Zumbani begins to cry. He goes home to daddy and he's crying and he's upset. And on line 1017, the father was taken by his tears. Now, Somala Casa is angry at the mistreatment of his son. And he's going to get his vengeance against those who have treated Amar Zumbani so poorly. And so what he does effectively, on line 1032, they went off to call the brother-in-law, and they go in there, and then on 1037, some stalks of millet, a grass mat, and sand. Can they support a person? He steps on line 1038. He steps onto the mat, which is actually got this hole underneath it. It looks like it's dirt, but it's not. He falls into the ground, And then immediately as the brother of Zaguma falls into the ground, they dump dirt into the hole and they kill him. All right, on 1040, they poured the dirt on him, they tapped it down, and now he's dead. Okay, now 1043, Zaguma was lying on her bed. She was wishing a happy holiday to everyone, and then she finds out the news that her brother has been killed by her husband, Sumalakasa. And on 1050, we get this, this anger for the person who tells her this is a griot, a female griot. I'm going to explode Zaguma. I'm going to explode the griot. This is the female griot. The griot says, I'm going to explode. And Zaguma says, tell me what you saw. And 1060, the eye sees the misfortune. And then she says, well, in truth, she says, he, meaning Sumalakasa, has killed him, meaning your brother. So Zaguma replies, that's it. And she calls her slave, and the Zaguma is also a woman who plays the goji. Okay, now the goji is a really interesting instrument. It's a small version of like a molo and a kora, and you play it with the violin. And the goji is there often to induce trance possession. Okay. In fact, I have a CD that I found. Actually, it's a cassette that I found that I turned into a CD and I digitalized it. But it's a very rare Ali Farkature CD where it says on it, "Do not play this CD after midnight because it's all goji music." And so you play the goji, you're inviting possession. Okay. You might watch. There's also a film on the internet you can find. It's an early film of Jean Rouch, his most controversial film. He's a very famous French anthropologist who filmed Songhay culture in the 40s and 50s. It's a film called Les Maîtres Fous, or The Mad Masters. Probably one of the most controversial films about Africa ever made. But there you see a similar kind of deal where people become possessed and they start to froth at the mouth and salivate. And this is partly, what happens is with the goji is you're seeking to basically to kind of harden your heart. Okay, and this is what Zaguma is doing. She's hardening her heart. Like you see this in the biblical narrative of the Mosaic story with his interaction with the Pharaoh. Is that the Pharaoh hardens his heart. Okay. Now this goes back. Remember we saw the image in the Book of the Dead about the heart of the mother. Okay, so we talked about the consuming of the fluids to deliberately make yourself polluted and therefore increase your heka, increase your bad niyama or your occult power. This is what she's doing, is she's increasing her occult power by hardening her heart. Okay, and now I want to note too, this idea of hardening your heart. You're going to see this throughout the Hale, this idea of the person, like in this culture of the sorcerers, who is the person is said to be a hard man. You're going to hear when you read the stories of El Hajj Omar Tal, his talibs or his followers are often referred to as they are hard men who never softened. And so this is a kind of a hardness, but it's hardness, and it can have also be kind of a virtue as well. But hard man is a man that you avoid because they're dangerous, and so she's making herself dangerous, okay? And then she does something very horrible. On line 1077, she takes her twin sons. They cried to come grab hold of their mother, and she took one of them by the two ankles and smashed him against the wall, and then he died. So she takes the baby, pow, smashes him against the wall, and then she does the other smashes it. She kills, but because she's killing the sons of Sumalakasa. That's how hard she's become, and she's getting her vengeance. But she's not done. She's only warming up here. Okay. She's a hard woman, a powerful woman, and a powerful witch, in fact. Making herself into this. So for 7 years, Zaguma was in the country of the Arma. We learn on line 1088. Okay, now, so this is interesting. We're going to see this again in the Tarikh al-Fatash. Now, the Arma, who are the Arma? The Arma are the people who end up destroying the Songhay Empire, and they are from Morocco. Okay, so in Marrakesh, and some of you are going to Morocco, or I think a few of you are, if you go to Morocco, you go to Marrakesh, you'll see the palace in Marrakesh of Muley Ahmed Mansour, who was the Pasha of Marrakesh at the time that all of this action occurred. Muley Ahmed Mansour had his eye on Timbuktu and Gao because he wanted to convert it into a vassal state of his own, to colonize it, in effect. But he wasn't able to do it, but as the dissensions began to arise among the Songhay and it began to be these internal struggles, he was sort of, wetting his lips and waiting to come in and take power. But he didn't send his own army. The Arma were, in effect, in Spain used to be a Muslim country. It was a Muslim country for about 800 or 900 years before it was a Christian country. When Spain became a Christian country, the Muslims and the Jews were not tolerated. They were burned at the stake, and this is what the Inquisitions were all about. The Muslims and Jews then many of them went into Morocco. The father of Mahmoud Kati as a Muslim, came to Timbuktu, leaving Spain. So he was actually a Sephardic Muslim, Arab Muslim from Spain. He left. So Spain now became Christianized, but there were many Christians who didn't like what had happened, interestingly enough. And so these were renegade Christians who then went to Morocco and became kind of like a mercenary army of Muley Ahmed Mansour. And that's who the army were. They were Christian mercenaries that were working on behalf of the Pasha of Marrakesh, who was a Muslim. And so they came into Timbuktu, they destroyed it, and what you'll see, for instance, in the Tarikh el-Fattah, it said that they spoke a technical language. And that technical language was, and then you have even a transcription of it, and that's in effect Spanish, that they're speaking Spanish. And so the Songhay hear this, they think this is a military language, we don't understand it. But what they're actually speaking is Spanish, and that's how they're issuing their military commands. And they're able to destroy it in part because they have superior military armaments, and Songhay only had bows and arrows. But the griot's going to mythologize this, and so we get the story of what in the griot version, Zaguma goes to Morocco, the country of the Arma, Marrakesh area, and everybody wants to marry her. Everybody wants to marry her, but on line 1099, Zaguma says, "My dowry is Sumala Kasa. The bull sacrificed at my wedding will be Amar Zumbani. Any man who has not killed these two men will not marry me. And so if you want to marry me, fine, but the price of it is you got to kill Sumala Kasa and you got to kill Amar Zumbani." All right, and she finds someone willing to do it. On line 1104 says, "No man wants to fight with Sumala Kasa, so she walks for many years in the land of the Arma. And then she heard about an Arma who is more courageous than the others," on line 1109. And this is a man named, as we learn on 1128, a man who's called Beiro. All right, so she goes to Beiro's house, and she says again, the dowry is Sumala Kasa, the bull sacrificed at the wedding will be Amar Zumbani. And he says, "Okay, I'll do it." Okay? So they go down, and so in effect, what this, it's sort of like, you get this idea that it was sort of a betrayal of Zaguma that led to the fall of the Moroccans. But in the historical version, there was a Songhay, a disenfranchised Songhay individual who went to see Muley Ahmed Mansour, and he gave away a lot of information that helped Muley Ahmed Mansour conquer the Songhay. So there was a betrayal, but it wasn't the betrayal of a woman. It was a betrayal of a man. But anyway, in this version, so they go, the Arma comes down to attack Gao, to attack the Songhay dynasty, and so the war really begins, okay? On line 1203, in this war, the women are involved. Many, many women are in the war. They're the ones who make the food for the crowd. They're eating. And so then you get this kind of strange story that for some reason the town of Gao cannot be destroyed, and the reason that we're given is an occult reason. Okay, so basically what's happening is that during the daytime, that the city kind of doubles itself. So when the Arma shoot at the city, they're not really shooting at the city because they're shooting at a double of the city and not the city itself. But in time, on line 10, 12, 60, we learn that the Arma are getting used to the city, And then on 1269, a young Arma is courting an older unmarried woman. It says, the girl said to him, but girl is put in quotes because effectively this is really an older woman, so he's being ironic here or sarcastic by calling her this girl, but she's really an older elderly woman. But she has this lover who is among the Arma, and she's said to betray the secret of the city by telling him about, look on line 1290, if that doesn't work, let's shoot in the sky, let's see. So they fire their guns into the air, and they are able to destroy the city because the occult secrets have been betrayed to the Arma. Okay, on line 1294, when they destroyed Gao, her heart trembled. This woman who betrayed them, this was Zaguma in this case. On that day, she thought about the compound of her mother. So now Zaguma is having mixed feelings, and Gao is being destroyed. Okay, the ox on line 1303, the ox went downriver, the python went downriver. These are all the totem animals of the city. 1305, the lion chicken went downriver. The entire town of Gao went downstream. And this also, we're going to read about this in the Tarikh, is that when the evacuation of Gao, many people left in canoes, and when the town was destroyed. Okay. Okay. All right. Now we want to go. We need to go to what I like to call the fecal epiphany of M.R. Zumbani, and we'll discuss that in just a minute. But before we do, let me see if there are any questions about anything. Yes.
Remind me who betrayed the occult secrets, or like let them out.
Well, of course, Zaguma, who wants her revenge, she is essentially the agent that solicits the destruction of Gao at the hands of the Arma. Okay. But then there's this other woman who's this elderly woman who has a lover who's among the Arma, and then she tells the army the secret of how the city elevates itself, and then what the griot is emphasizing is that it's that if you give up your secrets, then you're gonna destroy yourself, and that's what happens, is that they've given away their occult secrets. So the griot's always, the culture of sorcery, by the way, it's a culture of secrecy. This is why, again, remember we said we don't know what some of these lines in the griot epic mean, and we're not told because they're deliberately preserved as secrets, which then guarantees that it will be preserved and sustained. And so what she does is she gives away the secrets, and that is what leads to the city's destruction. And so the Arma now doesn't shoot at the false city at the double, they shoot at the actual city itself, and they're able to destroy the city.
Earlier you said that the griots were interested in preserving a more conservative approach.
Yeah.
I was just wondering what your meaning of conservative is in this, just traditional.
Conservative, we would, I think, if you're looking at, for instance, from a liberal democratic perspective, preserving the culture of blood nobility is partly what, the American Constitution rejected. I mean, if you read the Declaration of Independence, it's a long rant against monarchy, against King George, and so Republican ideology is often very hostile to the idea of nobility. So if you think of, say, for instance, contemporary Mali, one of the problems in contemporary Mali today is the persistence of this ancient caste system, which makes it very difficult for people to view each other as equals in the social contract, to put it in Rousseauian terms. And so the griots don't care about the social contract. They don't care about liberal democracies and modern constitutional republics. They want to preserve the ancient culture that's based on this caste system. So here you have people who are actually of the lower caste militating on behalf of the preservation of this caste system. And they would agree with the nobles who are outraged by the way that M.R. Zumbani is being elevated, who's essentially a false nobleman.
So would M.R. Zumbani be kind of the contrast to that conservative, maintaining that?
Yeah, so if things were truly just, then it would have been the brother of Zaguma who would have been honored, and he would have been just essentially a slave because he says he's not a nobleman, his blood is compromised.
Gotcha. Okay.
So in this tale, the person who like betrayed the city was made into a woman, and then there's another woman who like betrays the city. Is that
Misogynistic?
I mean, is that repeated in the other book? Like, is that a common thread?
The misogyny that you see in these instances, I don't think you're going to see that. I mean, the Chronicles are, I mean, not to say that there aren't misogynistic elements to it, but but it tends to be more historical because the scribes actually knew Askia Mohammed.
Okay.
And so as the story has evolved, remember this is 400, 500 years later after all these events. So this is it's interesting. I think one of the most interesting things in comparing these is to see what happens, how mythologies develop, and who drops out of the narrative in one case, and how things are explained. And so yeah, clearly the women are being scapegoated in these instances. Yeah.
When Gao was destroyed, where did everybody go?
Some went to Timbuktu, some dispersed. But see, Timbuktu, it's very terrible. You're going to see images in the Tarikhs of all of the destructions that happen. And I want you to think about this because today, very similar phenomena. Because if you look at the descriptions of what happened in Timbuktu and Al Qaeda and Islamic Maghreb, and the Ansar Dine came in. They did many of the acts that you see described in the Tarikh al-Fattah seem very contemporary because these acts were replicated. And one of the tragedies that resulted in the situation today is all these massive forced migrations of Tuareg and Songhay and other people as well. And these migrations are they're death marches. In fact, many of the elderly, children, people in weaker conditions die when they're forced to massively evacuate like that.
I was just curious what was so controversial about that film you mentioned there briefly.
Which film?
What was it, The Mad Masters?
Oh, The Mad Masters. Yeah. Well, Jean Rouch made some really wonderful films, but this one many felt sort of stepped over a line. And I would encourage you to Google it on the internet. You'll find it very easily. Like one of the things that they do is so this is a cult called the Halka, which they're related to the Songhay, but they're a more contemporary sort of spin-off of the Songhay. And they sacrifice a dog and eat it. Now, people do not normally sacrifice dogs, but again, this is a deliberate breaking of a taboo in order to, as we talked about, I mean, when taboos are sometimes deliberately violated, and in this case, a dog is killed and they ritually consume it, and many people go into trance possession. You see people with saliva coming out of their mouths, and Jean Rouch filmed all this. And then he showed it in screenings, and people, felt that he was depicting Africans in a very it would be like somebody going into a evangelical church in the deep south, and people are speaking in tongues and handling snakes, and then filming it in Africa and saying this is what American Christians are like. It was controversial. But for Rouch, it's important to note Rouch speaks of what he calls scene trance, and so he felt possession for him was not a pejorative notion, and so he felt that as a filmmaker, that he sometimes himself would become possessed. He would be drawn into the possession ceremony, and he would hold the camera and film while himself possessed. And so he thought of possession in this sense as not necessarily a negative phenomenon. But it remains controversial, but especially if you're interested in African cinema, I really encourage you to have a look at the film.
Sounds like a fun watch.
Yeah.
What was the significance of Saguma's brother? Other than, she loved him dearly, clearly, but was he gonna inherit anything?
I think that he's as uncompromised. His blood composition is not compromised in any way. He is a nobleman, and so I think it's that, even though he's an impoverished nobleman, he belongs to the nobility, and he's being dishonored. In the same way that Zaguma is being dishonored because of the favoritism that Sumalakasa shows to the captive slave wife. So it's about the caste system. And remember, the griots are conservative because they are in this epic advocating on behalf of the preservation of this caste system. Okay, so let's then continue. So now here this fecal epiphany. All right. So okay. So now we've heard about we've seen the film La Jeunesse, where Isaac and Esau are there, and Esau, played in the film by Salif Keita, is, although at this scene he's played by a younger version, consumes the red soup, and then a hierarchy is created, and he becomes subservient. We saw this in the Osiris narrative of Seth and Horus, and here we have yet another kind of consuming of filthy water that reveals his true identity. So basically what's happening is Sumala Kasa and Amar Zumbani they're fighting in this war now. The war is still going on, but it's out there in outside of Gao, in the fields and the bush and so on. And so while this war is happening, on line 1385, it says they put into a clay pot the liquid left over after washing the millet. They put the pot down to go to the river. They spent the day pounding millet. They prepared their millet and milk porridge, and in the evening they left. It was the next day at noon that the war came to this spot. Amar Zumbani saw the pot next to a cocoa rebe tree. Zip, he jumps down from his horse. Then he plunged his mouth into the clay pot. He drank until he quenched his thirst. So Amar Zumbani is drinking deeply from this pot of filthy water. And it's okay. He doesn't mind, all right? And he says to his father on line 1396, "Come, Father, I saw some water." The father says, "Well, praise be to Allah." And then the father follows him to the station until they arrive at the clay pot. He said, "There is the water." Then Sumala Kasa peeked into the clay pot. He says, "That's the water that you drank? You drank that water?" He asks him, another time, "You drank that water?" He says, "By Allah, I did drink some." He says, "Did you really quench your thirst?" "I quenched that thirst." It is that water that you wanted me to come and drink." He can't accept that he actually drank this water. And this is the moment when he says, okay, he finally realizes his own error. This is why I call it epiphany. Because he realizes that he was wrong by favoring Amar Zumbani. He says, "Amar Zumbani, you have revealed yourself to be who you truly are, a slave. Because you drank that pot of filthy water." What a misfortune, he says. And he says on line 1412, "You have returned home, Amar Zumbani. You have returned home." And he insulted, on line 1417, he insulted him as a captive, as a slave. He says, the fact of drinking his own mother's breast milk, that is the insult which he gave to him. Okay? So his insult is, you are the person who you are. You are of this lower caste. You are not a true nobleman. You drank your mother's breast milk. Your mother was a slave. And you are not a member of the nobility. Now I realize why I brought all this trouble upon my people and upon myself, because I didn't preserve the caste system as it should be preserved. Okay, and then also on line 1439, he says, the crowd calls it, "Amar Zumbani, you have ruined our war." Also, he has relations with women who are not pure. And, this is also one of the things that remember in the Jacob and Esau story, that Esau is reviled by his parents, not just because he drank the soup that his brother made, the poisoned soup that Jacob made, but he also had relations with other tribes. And his parents wanted, their children to have relations with people from their tribe. Okay, so we saw that whole sort of theme of tribal purity in that film, and we got the story of Onan. Amar Zumbani has destroyed the war. Okay, And that's so that it goes on, but that's basically the end of the narrative. And we learn what the real reason was for the fall of the empire. Okay. Now, when we read the Tarikh, one of the things I'd like you to do is to be able to compare and contrast. Like, why did the griots say the empire collapsed? Why do the scribes say? What are the contrasting narratives that emerge? And there are some interesting places of convergence, but they do have, as noted by the scribes, that the Songhay, fall of the Songhay is also attributed again to adultery, but this would be again the breaking of vows, but in this case also sexual immorality. And so the scribes are going to, as Muslims, are going to tend to see it in more moral terms, that it's their own inequity, their own infidelity, their own lack of morality that leads to the collapse of the empire. But we'll get into that when we look more at the Tarikhs. Okay. So we covered a lot. Are there any? I hope I didn't go too quickly, but please see if you have any other questions.
Seems like it's the father's fault for having the slave wife in the first place to give birth to his body.
Yeah.
So he punishes his son, but really,
ultimately it comes back to Sumala Casa. But he's also the failed hero, because he violates the taboo, but he can't control the chaos that he unleashes.
yeah. So taking out his personal frustration on his son.
It happens.
So I mean, you think about Ammar's body. I mean,
Some daddy issues.
yeah. I mean, you think about it just in strict moral terms. I mean, Ammar's body has not, doesn't really do anything that we could think of as morally wrong. He's just he's a bad character just because of who he is ontologically, because of the composition of his blood.
Just like the Bruce.
So bad for him.
Like,
Or Ammar's body.
Yeah.
Not a real person though either. Again, he's a mythologized character.
So
Alright.
if it's taboo to kill a dog, is it taboo to smash your twin sons against a wall?
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
To clarify.
No, that's
Yeah.
fine.
So, okay, yeah, so we'll stop there.